The massive station called Kepler-7 floated in the dark space between three different star systems. It was a neutral meeting place where species from across the galaxy came to discuss important matters. Today, the Grand Council chamber was filled with representatives from 47 different alien species. Some looked like giant insects, others were made of living crystal, and some breathed gases that would kill most other creatures. They all had one thing in common, though. They were here to judge humanity. Commander Jack Morrison walked into the chamber wearing his crisp Navy uniform. The blue fabric and polished buttons seemed plain compared to the exotic creatures around him. Next to him, Lieutenant Amy Chen carried a data tablet and looked calm despite the hundreds of alien eyes watching them. They had been chosen to represent Earth because they were good at staying professional under pressure. They would need that skill today. Jack stepped up to the presentation area in the center of the circular room. Amy activated the holographic display, and images of Earth's military ships appeared in the air above them. The fleet looked impressive to human eyes. 12 aircraft carriers, 38 destroyers, and 76 support vessels rotated slowly in the blue light of the projection. These ships represented years of work and billions of dollars. Earth had sent its best people to show the galaxy what humanity could do. The reaction was not what they had hoped for. A tall reptilian creature with scales like dark metal stood up from his seat. This was the Vraxian ambassador, representing one of the most powerful military forces in known space. He made a sound that came through the translation device as laughter. The noise was harsh and mocking. He spoke in his own language, but the words came out in perfect English through the translator that every delegate wore. "This is their entire navy," the Vraxian said, gesturing at the hologram with a clawed hand. "We have more ships in a single patrol group. How can they expect to be taken seriously?" Other delegates joined in with their own comments. A floating creature made of what looked like purple gas mentioned that human ships still used chemical rockets for some of their maneuvers. Another delegate, from a species called the Cathari, pointed out that Earth's weapons technology was at least 50 years behind the galactic standard. The Cathari were masters of gravity manipulation, and they found human reliance on conventional propulsion almost funny. Jack felt his jaw tighten, but he kept his face neutral. Amy caught his eye and gave him a small nod. They had known this might happen. Earth had only been part of the galactic community for 12 years. It started when a ship from the Zephon species had detected radio signals from Earth and decided to make contact. Since then, humanity had been learning how the galaxy really worked. The lesson was simple and harsh. Military power determined everything. If your species had strong weapons and big fleets, you had a voice in galactic affairs. If you did not, you were at the mercy of those who did. The presentation continued for another hour. Jack showed Earth's defensive capabilities, training programs, and technological development plans. Amy displayed data about human ship production and crew readiness. Nothing they showed changed the mood in the room. To these advanced species, humanity looked like children playing with toys. Earth's most powerful weapons were primitive compared to plasma cannons and gravity disruptors. Human ships were slow compared to vessels that could bend space itself. When the presentation ended, the Council voted on Earth's application for full membership. The result was what they called a probationary status. This meant Earth could send representatives to Council meetings and participate in trade agreements. Human ships could travel through most of galactic space without restriction, but when it came to the important things like territorial rights, resource allocation, and military protection, humanity would have to depend on other species. Earth could ask for help but had no guarantee of receiving it. The message was clear without anyone saying it directly. Earth's navy was too weak to matter. Jack and Amy left the council chamber and walked through the long corridors of Kepler-7 station. Other species' military officers stood in small groups, and some of them watched the two humans pass by. Jack heard quiet laughter from one group. Another set of aliens whispered to each other while looking in their direction. Amy kept her eyes forward and her shoulders straight, but Jack could see the tension in her posture. They reached their shuttle without speaking. Once inside the small craft with the door sealed, Jack pulled out his secure communicator. This device used quantum encryption that Earth's best scientists had developed. It could not be intercepted or decoded by anyone without the matching receiver. He typed 3 words into the device and sent them to Earth Defense Command in Colorado. The message was simple. Protocol Titan, proceed. Back on Earth, deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Admiral Kyle Brennan sat in a war room 2 miles underground. The room was filled with monitors, tactical displays, and communication equipment. Officers moved between stations, coordinating Earth's defense networks across the planet and throughout the solar system. When Jack's message appeared on the secure channel, Kyle read it and felt something settle in his chest. He had hoped this day would not come, but he had also prepared for it. Kyle turned to his executive officer, Commander Lisa Hayes, who stood at the tactical station reviewing ship deployments. She looked up when he said her name and he simply nodded. She understood immediately. They had discussed this possibility many times over the past year. Lisa began entering commands into her console, sending coded instructions to facilities scattered across the solar system. The galaxy thought it knew what humanity was capable of. They had seen Earth's public fleet and judged it to be weak. They had watched human diplomatic efforts and found them desperate. What they did not know was that humanity had been learning in other ways. For 12 years, Earth scientists had studied alien technology. Engineers had worked in secret facilities. Shipyards hidden in the outer solar system had been building something new, something the galaxy had never seen before. Kyle looked at the main display showing Earth from space. The blue and white planet looked peaceful and vulnerable. But appearances could be deceiving. Humanity had learned that lesson from the galaxy. Now it was time to teach one in return. The species that had mocked Earth's navy, that had laughed at human weapons, that had dismissed humanity as primitive and weak, were about to discover what humans could build when they were motivated by fear and determination. Protocol Titan was now active. The timeline they had hoped to avoid was in motion. There was no turning back from what would come next. 3 months passed after the council meeting, and the galaxy's attention shifted to a region called the Outer Borderlands. This area of space was far from the core worlds where the powerful species lived. It was a place where smaller civilizations tried to survive and build their colonies. The borderlands were rich with exotic matter, a rare resource used in advanced ship engines and weapons. Many species wanted control of these resources, and they were willing to fight for them. The Draxan Confederacy was a military alliance of 3 aggressive species. They had decided the borderlands would be theirs. Their method was brutal and efficient. They would arrive at a colony, broadcast a message giving everyone 24 hours to leave, and then destroy everything from orbit. Buildings, farms, power stations, everything turned to ash and rubble. The Draxans did not negotiate or accept surrenders. They simply took what they wanted. Among the species being pushed out were the Polarians. They were a peaceful people who looked somewhat like tall, thin humans with silver skin and large eyes. Their homeworld was on the edge of space that Earth had claimed for protection. The Polarians had been one of the few species willing to treat humanity fairly during those early years of contact. They had signed trade agreements that did not favor one side over the other. They had shared scientific knowledge freely. When Earth needed friends in the galaxy, the Polarians had offered friendship. Now 15 Polarian colony ships were running for their lives. These were not military vessels. They were converted cargo haulers and passenger transports carrying families, children, elderly citizens, and whatever possessions they could grab before fleeing. The ships were slow and had no weapons. Behind them came 6 Draxan interceptors, sleek warships designed for hunting exactly this kind of prey. The Draxans had decided that letting refugees escape sent the wrong message. If the Polarians wanted to run, they would die running. Captain Danny Torres commanded a human destroyer called the USS Defiant. His ship was stationed at the border between human-protected space and the borderlands. Danny was 32 years old and had been in Earth's Navy since the formation of the Space Fleet. He was a good officer, calm under pressure and careful with his crew's lives. Today he watched his tactical display as the Polarian ships limped toward safety. The refugee vessels were damaged and leaking atmosphere. Some were running on backup power. Children were on those ships, families who had done nothing wrong except live in a place that powerful species wanted. Danny's orders from Admiral Brennan were clear, but left room for judgment. Protect the refugees if possible, but do not start a war with the Draxan Confederacy. Earth was not ready for a full-scale conflict with a major military power. At least that was what the galaxy believed. Danny looked at his crew. His tactical officer was a young woman named Katie Brooks. His weapons officer was a man named Greg Hunter, who had served on submarines before joining the Space Navy. His engineer was Paul Chen, who could fix anything with enough time and spare parts. These people trusted him to make the right choice. The Draxon commander's voice came through on the open channel. The translation made his words sound cold and formal. "Human vessel, you are interfering in a legitimate military action. These ships are leaving Draxon territory without authorization. Stand aside or be destroyed with them." The threat was clear and backed by visible force. Each Draxon interceptor was 3 times the size of the Defiant. Their weapons could turn a ship like Danny's into vapor in seconds. According to every military analysis, every tactical simulation, every expert opinion, the smart thing to do was step aside. Danny Torres did not step aside. He maneuvered the Defiant directly between the Draxon hunters and the refugee ships. He raised shields and armed all weapons. His crew worked quickly, each person knowing their job without needing orders. Katie marked targeting solutions on the Draxon ships. Greg powered up the railgun systems and missile tubes. Paul diverted extra power to shields and engines. They all knew what this meant. They might die in the next few minutes, but they also knew they could not watch children die without trying to help. The first Draxon volley came fast. Plasma bolts, superheated matter contained in magnetic fields, crossed the distance in seconds. These weapons had destroyed countless ships over the years. The bolts hit the Defiant's shields and something unexpected happened. The shields held. They flickered and showed stress indicators, but they did not collapse. Earth's engineers had taken the basic shield design from the Zephon and improved it. They had added redundant power systems, better heat dissipation, and smarter energy distribution. The galaxy saw human shields as weak copies of alien technology. They were wrong. Danny returned fire. The Defiant's main weapons were railguns, electromagnetic accelerators that launched solid projectiles at incredible speeds. This was human technology, based on principles that Earth's military had been developing for decades before first contact. The aliens used energy weapons and plasma because they thought projectiles were primitive. They had forgotten that a solid object moving at a significant fraction of light speed carried devastating kinetic energy. The Defiant's railgun slugs hit the lead Draxon interceptor, and its shields collapsed under the impact. The second shot punched through armor and into the ship's reactor section. The battle lasted 4 minutes. When it ended, 3 Draxon interceptors were disabled and drifting in space. 2 had retreated, running back toward their fleet. 1 had been completely destroyed when its reactor exploded. The Polarian ships crossed into Earth-protected space safely. Danny sent medical teams to help with the refugees and filed his after-action report. He knew what would come next. The Draxons would not accept this loss quietly. The galaxy's response was immediate and divided. The Draxon Confederacy demanded that Earth surrender its border fleet for destruction. They wanted Danny Torres handed over for execution. They called the battle an act of war and began mobilizing their forces. The Galactic Council called another emergency session. Some species expressed shock that human weapons had worked so well. The Cathari delegate ran the numbers 3 times because she could not believe a human destroyer had defeated multiple Draxon warships. The Vraxian ambassador dismissed it as luck. Equipment failure on the Draxon side, he suggested. There was no way human technology could actually match Draxon military power. Most of the galaxy agreed with this assessment. They had seen Earth's fleet. They knew humanity was weak. One lucky battle did not change the fundamental reality. But in the background, military intelligence officers from various species began pulling reports that had been ignored before. A human frigate had outrun a Vraxian patrol ship near Proxima Station 3 months ago. The Vraxians had blamed engine problems. A human carrier group had performed combat maneuvers that should have been impossible with their supposed technology level. Analysts had dismissed it as sensor errors. Now people were starting to wonder if these incidents were really accidents and errors. Someone in the Zephon Intelligence Service found a report that had been filed and forgotten. It mentioned unusual construction activity in Earth's Kuiper Belt, the region of ice and rock beyond Neptune. Large structures were being built, hidden behind debris fields and protected by sophisticated stealth technology. The report had been ignored because everyone assumed humans were building mining stations or research facilities. Now the Zephon analyst looked at the data again and realized the energy signatures matched military shipyards. The Draxon Confederacy was furious. They had lost ships and credibility to a species the galaxy considered barely capable of spaceflight. Their response was to show everyone what real military power looked like. They assembled a battle fleet designed to crush Earth completely. 12 dreadnoughts, each one capable of destroying a small moon. 40 cruisers that could take on entire planetary defense systems, a command carrier that served as a mobile base for fighter craft and assault troops. This fleet could conquer most civilizations in a matter of weeks. The target was Earth itself. The Draxans would jump directly into human home space, broadcast terms of surrender, and expect immediate compliance. If Earth refused, orbital bombardment would begin. Cities would burn, billions would die. The fleet would arrive in 2 weeks, and the whole galaxy would watch humanity learn its place in the cosmic order. Every species with sensor equipment turned toward human space, waiting to see the young civilization humbled at last. The Draxan fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, like a wave of darkness blocking out the stars. 12 massive dreadnoughts led the formation, each one 5 kilometers long and bristling with weapons. Behind them came 40 cruisers arranged in perfect attack patterns. The command carrier sat in the center, coordinating everything through quantum communication links. It was the largest military force assembled in this region of space in over a century. War Marshal Thraken commanded from his flagship, confident that this display of power would end any thoughts of human resistance. Thraken broadcast his message on all frequencies, making sure every species in the galaxy with even basic receivers could hear. The terms were simple and non-negotiable. Earth would surrender its entire military fleet for decommissioning. Captain Danny Torres would be handed over for public execution as a war criminal. All human colonies outside the solar system would accept Draxan governance. Earth's government would pay reparations for the ships lost in the border incident. They had 6 hours to comply. If they refused, orbital bombardment would turn Earth's cities into ash. This was not a negotiation. It was a sentencing. On Earth, something strange happened. Cities did not panic. Air raid sirens remained silent. Instead, people gathered in public squares and parks. They stood on rooftops and balconies. They collected around screens in homes and offices. Millions of humans looked up at the sky not with fear, but with something that looked almost like anticipation. For 12 years, rumors had circulated about secret projects in the outer solar system. Construction jobs that required security clearances. Materials being shipped to facilities that officially did not exist. The government had kept secrets, but not perfectly. People knew something was out there. They had faith in something their species had built. At Kepler 7 station, the Galactic Council had called another emergency session. This meeting was being broadcast live across the galaxy. Billions of beings watched on their own worlds. The Vraxian ambassador spoke about the tragedy about to unfold. He called it unfortunate but necessary. Humanity had overstepped its bounds and now would learn a harsh lesson about galactic realities. The Cathari delegate called for intervention, suggesting that someone should stop the Draxans before they committed genocide. But her words were empty because no one was mobilizing fleets to help Earth. The Zephon representative, an elderly female named Coordinator Wren, sat quietly in her seat. Her expression was unreadable, but she watched the displays with intense focus. Deep beneath the Rocky Mountains in Colorado, Admiral Kyle Brennan stood in the war room surrounded by officers who had worked on the classified project for years. Lisa Hayes was at the tactical station, her fingers resting on a console that could change everything. Commander Jack Morrison had returned from the council station and now managed the communications array. Amy Chen monitored the global defense grid, coordinating with military installations from Colorado to Geneva to Beijing. Every person in that room knew this moment would define humanity's future. Kyle spoke calmly into the transmitter, his message going out on the same open channels the Draxans were using. War Marshal Thraken, you have entered the solar system with hostile intent. You have threatened civilian populations. You have demanded the surrender of our military forces and the execution of our officers. This is your only warning. Leave now or face the consequences. The response came quickly. Thraken's laughter echoed across space, translated into every language. The human admiral was welcome to deploy his little fleet. The carriers and destroyers would make fine target practice for junior weapons crews. The Draxan fleet began moving toward Earth, their formation perfect and intimidating. Weapons systems charged, targeting computers locked onto human installations. Everything proceeded according to Draxan battle doctrine. Kyle looked at Lisa and said her name quietly. She entered the activation sequence into her console. The command went out simultaneously to 5 different locations scattered across the solar system. Near Jupiter's orbit, hidden in the swirling gases of the giant planet's upper atmosphere, in the asteroid belt, camouflaged among rocks that had floated there for billions of years, within Saturn's rings using ice and dust as cover, behind Luna, Earth's moon, where sensors had trouble penetrating the rock. In high Earth orbit, hiding in plain sight using stealth systems that bent light and radar around their hulls, something had been waiting. Stealth fields that had kept them invisible suddenly deactivated. Energy signatures erupted across every sensor in the solar system. The readings were so massive that instruments designed to track normal spacecraft briefly overloaded. Every species monitoring the situation saw the same impossible data appear on their screens. 5 ships materialized. Ships that made the Draxan dreadnoughts look small. Each one was 15 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide. They were geometric monoliths of human engineering that looked more like mobile space stations than traditional vessels. Their hulls were dark composite materials layered with reactive armor that could deflect energy weapons. Their surfaces were covered with weapon systems, railgun batteries that could punch through planetary crust, missile pods holding thousands of smart warheads, point defense systems so numerous and densely packed, they looked like metallic fur. Energy weapons adapted from 3 different alien technologies and refined by human engineers into something new and terrifying. The Titan class had revealed itself. Their identification transponders broadcast their names: TCS Olympus, TCS Everest, TCS Kilimanjaro, TCS Denali, TCS Atlas. Each ship housed 12,000 crew members. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a civilization. Each represented the culmination of 12 years of absolute human determination, never to be vulnerable again. War Marshal Thracken's laughter died in his throat. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and military command centers, in universities and civilian homes, every species capable of reading sensor data stared at their screens in complete shock. The energy signatures suggested weapons that exceeded anything short of the most advanced Vraxian or Cathari designs. The mass readings indicated armor that would require sustained fleet bombardment to penetrate. The power outputs suggested reactors using principles that most species thought were purely theoretical. And there were 5 of them. 5 impossible ships that had appeared from nowhere. Captain Ben Rodriguez commanded the Olympus, the flagship of the Titan fleet. His voice was calm and professional as it transmitted to the Draxan fleet. War Marshal Thrackan, this is Captain Rodriguez of the Terran colonial ship Olympus. You have 30 seconds to begin charging your hyperspace drives for departure. If you are still in this system after 31 seconds, we will interpret your presence as acceptance of combat. Choose wisely. The Draxan fleet did not move. Pride kept them in formation. Thrackan had conquered 14 star systems in his career. He had personally overseen the destruction of 6 different civilizations. He had never retreated from an inferior force, and he refused to believe these human ships were anything more than an elaborate bluff. His species had been warriors for 10,000 years. Humans had been in space for barely a century. The idea that they could threaten the Draxan Confederacy was absurd. He gave the order to open fire, certain that concentrated plasma fire from his dreadnoughts would prove these massive human ships were just empty shells designed to intimidate. His weapons officers locked targeting solutions and released the first volley. Hundreds of plasma batteries fired simultaneously, enough destructive power to crack a small moon. The bolts crossed the distance in seconds and struck the Titan-class shields. Nothing happened. The shields absorbed the attack with minimal power drain. The Draxan weapons splashed against the defensive barriers like water against a dam. Status reports came back to Thrackan showing that the human ships had not even diverted additional power to shields. They had taken the full assault of a Draxan battle fleet on their standard defensive systems. Ben Rodriguez transmitted one more time. War Marshal Thrackan, order your fleet to stand down. There is no shame in recognizing superior force. I am offering you a chance to avoid unnecessary casualties. The words were professional and genuine. Earth did not want to slaughter thousands of Draxan crew members. But the offer also made clear what would happen if Thrackan continued. The Draxan commander refused. Pride and duty demanded he press the attack. He ordered his fleet to close distance for boarding actions and continue bombardment. He still believed human technology could not match Draxan military might. That belief was about to cost him everything. The battle lasted 11 minutes from first shot to final surrender. Historians across the galaxy would later debate whether it was even proper to call it a battle at all. A battle suggested some degree of equal contest. two forces testing each other's strength and finding a victor through effort and sacrifice. What happened in the solar system that day was not a battle. It was a demonstration delivered with precision and overwhelming force. The Draxon fleet continued firing after their first volley failed. Hundreds of plasma batteries released streams of superheated matter. Kinetic cannons launched solid projectiles at high velocity. Missile pods opened and sent smart warheads toward the Titan-class ships. This was enough firepower to destroy entire planetary defense grids. The Draxons had used these same weapons to conquer 14 star systems. They had destroyed fleets twice the size of what Earth had publicly acknowledged. The Titan-class ships raised their shields to full power. The defensive barriers shimmered as they absorbed the incoming fire. Energy readings showed the shields operating at only 40% capacity, despite the massive assault. The Draxon weapons continued to splash harmlessly against the barriers. Inside the Olympus, Captain Ben Rodriguez watched the tactical display with calm focus. His crew worked their stations efficiently. The weapons officer reported targeting solutions ready. The tactical officer confirmed enemy fleet positions. Everything was prepared. Ben transmitted one final warning to the Draxon fleet. War Marshal Thraken, order your ships to stand down. There is no shame in recognizing superior force. This is your last chance to avoid bloodshed. He meant every word. Earth did not want to kill thousands of Draxon crew members. The goal was to demonstrate capability, not to commit slaughter. But Thraken responded by ordering his fleet to close distance for boarding actions. The Draxon commander still believed his forces could overwhelm the human ships through sheer numbers and experience. The Olympus fired a single railgun round. The tungsten slug was accelerated to 5% of light speed by electromagnetic coils that ran the length of the ship's main gun. At that velocity, the projectile carried kinetic energy equivalent to a nuclear weapon. It crossed the distance to the lead Draxon dreadnought in less than a second. The dreadnought's shields collapsed on impact. The slug punched through the forward armor, through 3 decks of crew compartments, through the main reactor section, and out the back of the ship. Secondary explosions rippled along the dreadnought's hull as power conduits ruptured and fuel lines ignited. The massive warship broke into 3 pieces, each section tumbling away from the others in different directions. That single shot changed everything. The Draxon fleet suddenly understood what they were facing, but by then it was too late to retreat. The other 4 Titan-class ships opened fire in a coordinated pattern that had been planned and practiced for years. The Everest, commanded by Captain Sophie Grant, engaged the left flank of the Draxon formation. The Kilimanjaro took the right flank. The Denali and Atlas focused on the cruiser screen protecting the command carrier. Each Titan-class ship fought with devastating efficiency. Railgun rounds traveled too fast for conventional point defense systems to track. The Draxon ships tried to intercept the incoming slugs, but their targeting computers could not process the necessary calculations quickly enough. Round after round found critical systems, reactor cores, command bridges, engine sections, weapons batteries. Every shot was precisely aimed to disable rather than destroy when possible. Human commanders had been given clear orders: minimize casualties, show capability without unnecessary killing. Missile pods on the Titan-class ships opened and released swarms of smart warheads. Each missile had its own guidance system and target selection programming. The Draxon point defense systems engaged, shooting down dozens of missiles, but there were thousands of them. For every missile destroyed, 10 more got through. They struck shield generators, sensor arrays, and communication equipment. Draxon ships began losing coordination as their networks failed. Individual captains could no longer communicate with the command carrier. The fleet's perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Energy weapons fired from the Titan-class ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Human engineers had studied Cathari gravity disruptors and Zephon particle beams. They had taken the principles behind both technologies and created something new. The beams that lanced out from the Olympus and her sister ships could be tuned to different frequencies. Some disrupted shield harmonics, causing defensive barriers to collapse. Others specifically targeted propulsion systems, disabling engines without destroying entire ships. It was surgical and precise. The Draxon command carrier tried to escape. Its massive engines flared as it attempted to charge its hyperspace drive. This was a standard retreat protocol when a battle was lost. The ship would jump to a rally point, regroup with reinforcements, and return with overwhelming numbers. But Captain Sophie Grant on the Atlas had been waiting for this exact move. She fired a weapon that Earth had developed in absolute secrecy, a hyperspace interdiction pulse. The pulse was based on theoretical physics that most species had dismissed as impossible to weaponize. It created a localized disruption in the fabric of space itself, making hyperspace transition impossible within a specific area. The Draxon carrier's drive activated halfway through its charging sequence. The result was catastrophic for the ship's engines. Safeties kicked in immediately, but not before massive damage occurred throughout the propulsion system. The carrier went dead in space, powerless and helpless. When the firing stopped, the tactical displays showed the results clearly. 38 Draxon ships were disabled and drifting. Their crews were alive but trapped in vessels without power or life support. 14 ships had been completely destroyed, their reactors breached or hulls vaporized when humans had no choice but to use lethal force. Not a single Titan-class ship had taken damage. The shields had never dropped below 30% capacity. Human casualties were 0. Ben Rodriguez transmitted on all frequencies. War Marshal Thrackan, your fleet is defeated. Your crews have fought bravely, but this conflict is over. I am offering you the opportunity to surrender with honor. Medical ships are standing by to assist with casualties. Rescue operations will begin immediately for disabled vessels. This offer expires in 60 seconds. Thrackan sat on his command chair aboard the crippled flagship, staring at displays that showed his fleet in ruins. 30 years of military service, 14 conquered systems, a career built on the certainty that Draxon military might was superior to all others. Everything he believed had been shattered in 11 minutes. His communications officer looked at him, waiting for orders. His tactical officer had tears running down his scaled face. They had lost friends on the destroyed ships. They all knew death was seconds away if the admiral refused to surrender. Thrackan accepted. His voice was hollow, empty of the arrogance that had filled it earlier. The surrender went out on all channels. Human medical ships moved in immediately, bringing supplies and rescue teams to the disabled Draxon vessels. Earth's smaller destroyers and frigates helped stabilize damaged ships, preventing reactor breaches that would have killed surviving crew members. Ben Rodriguez coordinated the rescue efforts personally, making sure every Draxon sailor received help regardless of rank or species. But the real message was not being sent to the Draxons. It was being broadcast to everyone watching across the galaxy. At Kepler 7 station, the council chamber was completely silent. The Vraxian ambassador stared at tactical displays showing the battle's outcome. His earlier confidence had transformed into something that looked very much like fear. The Cathari delegate was recalculating human military strength, her advanced brain processing numbers that made no sense. 12 years ago, humans had barely understood basic spaceflight. Now they had built weapons that surpassed anything the Cathari themselves possessed. Species that had dismissed humanity as weak, as newcomers playing at military power, now understood they had been catastrophically wrong. The galaxy had mocked Earth's navy because they judged only what they could see. They had never considered what humans might build in secret. They had assumed 12 years was not enough time to bridge the technology gap. They had forgotten that humanity's entire history was defined by rapid adaptation and innovation when survival was at stake. Admiral Kyle Brennan transmitted a message to the Galactic Council, his face appearing on screens throughout member worlds. The Titan-class vessels were authorized by Earth's unified government 6 months after first contact. We saw how this galaxy operates. We understood that military power determines everything: safety, respect, the right to exist without fear. We built accordingly. He paused, letting his words reach every corner of known space. Earth does not seek conquest. We have no desire for empire. But we will never again be vulnerable. Any species that threatens Earth, that threatens our allies, that threatens peaceful civilizations under our protection, will receive the same response the Draxon Confederacy received today. 6 months after the Titan-class revelation, the Galactic Council convened for a restructuring vote. The chamber on Kepler 7 station looked the same as always, but everything else had changed. The atmosphere was different. The way delegates spoke to each other was different. Most importantly, the way they treated humanity was completely different. Where once Earth's representatives had stood at a junior podium, meant for probationary members, now they sat at the High Council table reserved for premier military powers. Commander Jack Morrison, promoted to ambassador after his role in the crisis, took his seat between the Vraxian and Cathari delegations. Amy Chen, now a full commander with decorations from 3 different governments, served as Earth's military attaché. Her uniform bore medals for protecting refugee corridors and coordinating humanitarian missions. The proposal before the Council was straightforward. Recognize Earth as a Tier 1 power with full voting rights, military autonomy, and permanent Council membership. The vote would determine if humanity had truly earned its place among the galaxy's leaders. The vote was unanimous. Every single delegate voted in favor. The Vraxian ambassador, who had laughed at human ships 6 months ago, now spoke carefully about mutual cooperation and shared security interests. The Cathari delegate proposed joint technology development agreements. Her species wanted to understand how humans had achieved such rapid advancement. Even the Draxan Confederacy, now represented by a new war marshal after Thraken's forced retirement, voted yes. Their recent defeat had taught them expensive lessons about underestimating opponents. But the council session was not the real story. The real changes were happening throughout the galaxy in ways both large and small. Earth had not just revealed military power. They had revealed a philosophy about how that power should be used. This philosophy resonated with smaller species, who had spent centuries living in fear of larger neighbors. The Polarian government signed a comprehensive defense treaty with Earth. They became the first members of what was now called the Terran Protection Coalition. 7 other species, all of them previously bullied by more powerful civilizations, approached Earth about similar arrangements. The terms were fair and transparent. Earth provided military protection and shared defensive technology. In exchange, the protected species agreed to trade partnerships and mutual defense obligations. No forced cultural integration, no resource extraction without fair payment, no colonial governance. Just alliances built on mutual benefit and respect. Captain Danny Torres, whose defense of Polarian refugees had started everything, now commanded the TCS Everest. His ship, along with the other Titan-class vessels, had been joined by 3 more. The TCS Himalaya, TCS Andes, and TCS Rockies emerged from the construction yards in the Kuiper Belt. Each new ship incorporated improvements based on combat data from the Draxan engagement. The shipyards themselves were no longer hidden. Earth had stopped pretending to be weak. Construction continued openly, and every species in the galaxy watched the docks through their long-range sensors. Admiral Kyle Brennan stood in the war room beneath Colorado, looking at updated star charts. The maps showed Titan-class ships stationed across 5 different star systems. Destroyer groups patrolled major trade routes, their presence deterring pirates and raiders. Carrier groups conducted joint military exercises with allied species, teaching and learning new tactics. Lisa Hayes, promoted to Admiral and given command of Earth's Second Fleet, worked beside him coordinating the expanded operations. "They respect us now," Lisa said quietly, studying diplomatic status reports on her tablet. "Fear mixed with respect." Kyle nodded slowly. "Fear fades over time. Respect has to be maintained through consistent action and moral authority. The Titan class want us a seat at the table. Keeping that seat requires something more than just big ships and powerful weapons." He pulled up casualty reports from the Draxan battle. Human losses were 0. Draxan casualties exceeded 15,000 before Earth's medical ships arrived to provide assistance. That number haunted Kyle despite knowing the battle had been necessary. "We showed we could destroy a fleet in 11 minutes. Now we need to show we can build something better than endless cycles of war and conquest." That philosophy was already taking shape across protected territories. Earth engineers worked with Polarian scientists on agricultural technology that could feed both species more efficiently. Human medical teams deployed to Cathari colonies suffering from a viral plague that their own doctors could not cure. Titan-class ships escorted trade convoys through regions infested with pirates. Their mere presence was enough to prevent attacks. No shots needed to be fired. The pirates saw the massive warships and decided to find easier targets elsewhere. On Kepler 7 station, Ambassador Jack Morrison met privately with Coordinator Wren of the Zephon. The elderly alien regarded him with an expression that might have been satisfaction or vindication. "My government made first contact with your species because we believed humans had potential," she said through her translation device. Many Zephon doubted that assessment. They saw your violent history, your divided governments, your tendency toward conflict. They thought you would either destroy yourselves or become a threat to others. Jack listened carefully. Ren continued speaking. They were not entirely wrong. Humanity is dangerous. You have proven that beyond any doubt. But you have also proven to be dangerous in defense of principles rather than for mindless conquest. The galaxy needed that reminder. Power without wisdom creates tyrants. Wisdom without power creates victims. You have shown you can balance both qualities. The conversation ended, but its implications spread through diplomatic channels. Earth had not just changed its own status in galactic politics. It had changed the fundamental equations that governed how species interacted. Smaller civilizations now had hope that aggression could be resisted. They had proof that military might could be challenged successfully. Aggressive powers now understood that expansion had limits. The galaxy's power structure, unchanged for centuries, had shifted in profound ways. Years later, historians would debate the significance of what became known as the Titan Revelation. Some argued it was humanity's greatest triumph, the moment Earth truly became a galactic power. Others suggested it was simply inevitable. Any species with human determination and adaptability would have achieved similar results given the same circumstances and motivations. The debates would continue for generations. But in the quiet corridors of Earth Defense Command, in the crew quarters of Titan-class ships, in diplomatic offices on alien worlds, the people who had lived through those events knew the truth. The galaxy had mocked Earth's navy because they judged based only on visible capabilities. They never considered what humans might be building in secret. They assumed 12 years was insufficient time to bridge a massive technology gap. They underestimated what motivated humans could accomplish when their survival was threatened. Captain Ben Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Olympus, watching Earth rotate peacefully far below. His crew worked efficiently around him. They were veterans now of both combat operations and peacekeeping missions. The ship's sensors reported no threats anywhere in the system. No distress calls required response. It was a quiet day, the kind that would have been impossible before the Titan class changed everything. He thought about War Marshal Thraken's laughter that had echoed across the galaxy before the battle. He thought about the Vraxian ambassador's mocking tone in the council chamber. He thought about every species that had dismissed humanity as weak, primitive, and irrelevant. They had all learned the same lesson that day 6 months ago. Earth could be mocked. Humanity could be underestimated. Human technology could be dismissed as inferior. But when threats became real, when diplomacy failed, when the choice came down to submission or resistance, humans would always choose the same path. They would build something bigger, stronger, and more advanced than anyone thought possible. Then they would deploy it above the cities of those who had threatened them. The galaxy remembered that lesson now, and as long as ships like the Olympus patrolled human space, as long as officers like Ben Rodriguez commanded them, as long as Earth maintained both the capability and the will to defend itself and its allies, the galaxy would never forget.